Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I do this normally every Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon UK time. The format, we'll take a look at some of the major announcements due out next week. Then we'll take a look at the usual markets, stock market indices, oil, gas, some currency markets, gold, silver, Bitcoin. And then if there's any markets you want looking at, I'll jump into the comments afterwards and we'll have a look at anything that you want to look at. So if there's anything you want looking at, put it in the comments. It's been a much more interesting week this week. I've had a good week this week. But I think we're seeing, particularly with stock markets, we've got the S&P here. We'll have a look at it in a bit more detail. But the S&P yesterday and today, finally starting to push out of this range. Is this the start of the next great bull market? Let's see. But yeah, I was complaining, I think, last week how boring it was. That it'd been the most boring and quiet it felt for a long time, perhaps even years. A lot of sideways stuff going on in lots of markets. But first signs of that changing this week. So I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're in for some more interesting times ahead. Anyway, we'll get into that in a second. Let's just get some of the housekeeping done. Still a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, so next week's interesting. Probably Wednesday evening UK time will be the biggest event for next week. The minutes from the latest Federal Reserve interest rate decision thing. So the Fed minutes come out on Wednesday night. Always interesting because it gives us perhaps a bit of narrative about how the US central bank sees the US economy and perhaps some hints as to what they're going to do with future interest rate changes. So that'll be an interesting one, Wednesday evening. Then Thursday, we've got US GDP, the US economic figures. How well or not has the US economy done in the last quarter? That'll be another interesting one. Yeah, I think I've spoken in recent live sessions about some of this chat about a US going into a big recession, blah blah blah. What does it mean for stock markets? Stock markets don't care, like I said last time around. And if you look at what markets have done this week, they absolutely don't care. So markets are not particularly worried about the US economy. But that'll be interesting next Thursday. See what that looks like. Before we get into the markets, the usual mention for the trading course I run. I've been running this trading course for a few years now. There are two courses within the overall course umbrella thing. There's the medium-term trading approach. That was the original course, which looks at putting trades on, holding positions for weeks and months. There are 11 video lessons there. That is still my preferred method of trading. I've got back into stock trading this week. I've been talking about it a bit with people on the WhatsApp group. But for me, I'd much rather run a trade for days and weeks and months, rather than a couple of hours. So there's 11 video lessons there. There is a short-term trading module that was launched last year, holding positions over hours and days. There are 7 video lessons on that. As part of the course, you get access to live webinars held by me, run every month. So that's all part and parcel of the thing. And there's a WhatsApp group that's going all right, I think. Been running for about 3 or 4 months now. And I update it every day with stuff that I think is interesting. And there's always a bit of chat backwards and forwards, and always happy to answer any questions. So that's all part of the course as well. The trading performance, I publicly traded an account with £4,000 in, £4,000 of real money from November last year to January, end of January this year. Booked profits with just under £2,200. If you go back through some of the YouTube videos from November, December last year on this channel, you'll see me talking about that account as it was going along. But that was the end result. And I did it because I think, the trading education environment is full of con artists and hucksters, as the Americans might say, who don't talk about profits, who have theoretical profits, all that nonsense. So I thought I'd show it with real money. So there you go. So I have to say, of course, that past performance is no guarantee of future performance, but that's what the performance looked like. You can see more about that on the website. Also, I have been trading this account that I use for these sessions as well. This is a live account with real money that I just use for the YouTube stuff. I put $2,000 in there. We'll talk a bit perhaps about some of these trades that are running in there. The absolute big winner at the moment, clocking in with $500 of open profit. I think that was for maybe $300 risk, is the NASDAQ trade, not surprisingly, but there's a few others in there as well. So that account at the moment is up £600. And I think it was only a couple of months I opened it up. Let's go back. First trades back there. Yeah, 31st of March. So that was a £2,000 account, I think, and it's up. It's open profits of about 600 quid so far. So I'm all about, I'd never say that trading is easy. Absolutely not. But, I do try and demonstrate that you can be profitable. And I talk about all of this, of course, in the course. So if you go to the website, you can find out more. There's the Trustpilot reviews, 5-star Trustpilot reviews so far for those who come on the course. So thanks for that. There's a newsletter I send out every week. If you go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, if you're not on the list, if you put your email in there, you can subscribe to the newsletter. That's free of charge. There's a broker section. You can see what broker I use, that account I just showed you. I did a short 10-minute video explaining why I use the broker I use. You can try those out. And you can see more about the trading course content and the performances, all that stuff, and a breakdown, I think, of all the trades that I did over that 3-month period is in there as well. So that's it. So that's the message from the sponsor, which is me. So go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, and find out a bit more about that. Okay, let's go. I'm going to talk about stock markets, first of all. I think it's really interesting what's going on in stock markets. Like I said, at the open, the account I use for these YouTube videos, the real money account, the biggest trade is the NASDAQ. I put the NASDAQ trade on back here. So I think it was for the video I did on the channel at the end of April. Bought the NASDAQ down at 12,830. And here we are, 1,000 points higher. This NASDAQ, it's been a great run in the NASDAQ. If we take a look at that, we have seen, let's just tidy things up a bit. If we pick up on the trends, off those lows, the Jan lows, that trend has been continuing. What's interesting for me this week, we've broken, it's only a couple of days, let's not crack the champagne out just yet, but we've broken the old highs from August, so we are at the best levels since April. So it's nearly a 13-month high on the NASDAQ. And I think this is interesting. Clearly we had the big sell-off in stock markets from the beginning of January last year. That eventually ended, and I do think, for me, everything we're seeing at the moment is the continuing reversal of that downtrend. So if I was going to pick out a big target for the NASDAQ, I'd be saying 17,000. I don't think it's going to do 17,000 by July, but I do wonder if we see, a gradual grind up from here. It's had a bit of a run. It's pretty overbought on the old squiggles down here. So absolutely susceptible to something of a sell-off from these levels. But I'll be a buyer of the dip. I'm long the NASDAQ anyway in my own account. I'm long in that account, the YouTube account with the real money. And I'm long in my own trading as well. So, great run over the last couple of weeks or so for the NASDAQ. I'll be a buyer of the dip. For me, if it starts trading below 12.7, then I'd start to think that, okay, perhaps this recovery is in trouble. But for now, at least, stock markets seem really strong. Same with the S&P. This S&P had been absolutely dire in this bit here. If we look from April through to the middle of May. Really boring market. But, once again, the move we saw yesterday and is continuing today, US markets have just opened in the last 10 minutes, breaking out through the highs from Jan. We do have, if I was looking for a target on the S&P, my target, these 43.25 levels. So about 100 points or so higher from where we are now. And this was a big level. The market did go crashing to new low. Well, not crashing, but did sell off to new lows for the downtrend from those August highs. So interesting to see what happens there. But again, S&P buyer of the dip on the S&P. So hopefully things get a bit more exciting over the next month. Now the S&P has followed the NASDAQ higher. Let's see what happens. But again, I'd be a buyer of the dip in the NASDAQ. DAX, I've got a trade on the DAX. I've had a DAX trade on for about a month or so. This is really interesting. We had these all-time highs for the DAX in November. This is the German market from November 21 and into January 22. And we're here. We are here. So are we going to see new all-time highs for the DAX? Maybe we're seeing it already. I don't know. But we're close anyway. But again, I'd be a buyer of the DAX on dips, and the price action is definitely encouraging. What's going on with the DAX? Finally, the FTSE. I bought the FTSE this week. A short-term trade in the FTSE. It's not quite as exciting, the FTSE, to be honest. As we often see, when FTSE is very different mix-up to S&P, NASDAQ and DAX, a lot more defensive. And when those markets have suffered, we've seen the FTSE do well. Perhaps if we're going into much more of a risk-on environment, that will affect the FTSE. So a bit boring, the FTSE, but I did buy it this week. I bought it at, where was it? I think it was about 77.40, something like that in here. So a bit of chop around, but relatively strong finish to the week. So I'm still long the FTSE. So yeah, that's stock markets. Let's look at the Japanese market. We've not looked at that for a while. Let's look at the Japan 225. Here we go. Whoa, that's off as well. Wow, that's really, I am surprised by that. It's not all-time highs, is it? But because it hit 40,000 in the late 80s, early 90s. But that's been a fantastic run on the Japanese market. Crack out the sake. So that is a multi-year high, the old Nikkei 225. Again, perhaps a bit overextended in the short term. But what's that market done since the lows in Jan? Lows in Jan were 25.5 or 31 now. So 5.5 grand, so 22%, something like that, off those lows. There you go. Interesting times. Yeah, someone mentioned the Russell. Yeah, the Russell has lagged. The Russell 2000, isn't it? That is really, you'd never know what was going on in other markets looking at the US Russell. But there you go. So it's the big stuff in the US anyway, that's moving markets. So that's it. Stock markets, pretty bullish. Let's look at my my next favourite market after the S&P is the old dollar index. So the dollar against a basket of other currencies. I bought that on a short-term trade. I came out of it today actually, but I've been in it on a short-term trade for a bit. Great trend on that. I think from down here somewhere. I can't remember. But if you're on the WhatsApp group, you'll remember. But a great run in the DXY dollar index. I came out of it, I don't know, today. I'm not sure where. But that trend is still strong. This is another really interesting market though. Because let's take this trend line off for now. We had the retest. We talked about this a lot in recent weeks. We had the retest in April of the Feb lows, and another retest late April, another retest in May, and we've seen it bounce up. It's blipped up to its best levels for perhaps a couple of months. And it continues this idea, or this thing that I've been talking about. Are we going to see the US dollar stage a recovery for the rest of the year? Let's see what happens. But a great performance in the short term. I'm still long in this account, I think. Dollar index. When did I do that trade? Let's have a look. 28th of April. So put that trade on in here somewhere. Bit of chop, and it's got to move on. So yeah, but on the hourlies, I'd still be a buyer of the dip. It was only yesterday it hit a new high for that recovery. And clearly this has an impact on so many other markets, the euro, the pound, the price of gold, silver, all that stuff. Look at that, almost textbook in the last hour or so on the old What's It. Oh, if I could say, if you're watching as well, I always forget to do this, if you could click the like button to help the old YouTube algorithm. But that looks pretty positive, doesn't it? Let's see what happens. Euro, let's look at the euro against the dollar. I mean, because the US dollar has had such a run, you know, clearly it has put pressure on markets quoted against the US dollar, like the euro. So we had seen recovery highs for the euro less than a month ago against the dollar, and we've seen it sell off. But it's interesting where it's brought it back to. You know, we're back to these uptrend, the uptrend that started in September for the euro. You know, if we do see the dollar come under pressure, for me, buying the euro is an interesting trade. So that's an interesting one to watch next week. I think euro against the dollar, pound against the dollar. Let's just get rid of these shorter term levels. Same thing, pound against the dollar. You know, I picked up on the lows from October. Let's see what happens. So perhaps, you know, if we did see this dollar rally come under some pressure next week, some of these markets start to look interesting. And finally, dollar yen. I've got a trade on dollar yen. I don't think, have I got it in that account? No. So I've got that in my own account, my personal account, dollar yen. But interesting again here, you know, I bought into the dollar against the yen back in March, you know, based off the little recovery that has been chugging along since January. And it's taken a while. But this is why I prefer these medium-term things, because I don't have to worry about it day to day, you know, and the thing has yesterday pushed out to its best levels since November last year. So again, perhaps in the short term, bit overextended. If you like the RSI, bit of bearish divergence maybe going on the RSI. Maybe we'll see it sell off, but I would absolutely be a buyer of the dip in the dollar against the Japanese yen. So much more interesting stuff to look at compared to what we had seen. But so great run for the dollar. Perhaps it's overdone. Let's see, you know, we'll have some volatility over that, the Fed minutes on Wednesday of next week. So let's see how that turns out. That's that. What else should we look at? Let's look at gold and silver. See, gold looks the same. So gold, I think I've said a few times, I can't quite believe that gold was above $2,000 an ounce, but it was. And it did very briefly hit fresh all-time highs in there, 4th of May, so just a couple of weeks ago. But again, with the dollar strength, of course, gold has been knocked back, blah, blah, blah. And here we are. We're sitting at 1960 for gold. Should we let's do a trade on gold? Perhaps it's a bit early. Perhaps we should wait next week. But, you know, again, if we are going to see this dollar strength unwound a bit, I think it's quite interesting here. Let's put a trade on. We'll be a buyer of gold. So we've got lows from March, 2 months ago, at 1934. Trend line coming in at 1925. Let's set that up. Let's do we'll do a bit of an anticipatory trade on gold with a stop at 1900. Have I got enough margin in this account? What's that, $600 risk? I do have enough margin. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be a buyer of gold at 1960. I'm going to buy 10, put a stop at 1900. So my risk is about $600 on this trade. I think that's an interesting one. We didn't do a trade last week, so let's get one on this week. There we go. We are in. So buying 10 at 1960. So I think it's interesting to see if we do get a bit of a bounce. I think if we start trading below, you know, these lows in March, from March, perhaps the risk is for a deeper sell-off, and that recovery from November last year is in trouble. Let's see. Let's see what happens with that. So that's an interesting one. Silver. There's an argument for being a bit of an aggressive buyer on silver. I mean, I hate silver, as I often say. Yesterday, it did push yesterday below those lows from April. Those lows were 23.50 or thereabouts. There's an argument if you thought it overshot a bit on the downside to be a buyer with maybe a stop at 22.50. There's maybe an aggressive trade in there. Let's see. But so much of this stuff, of course, absolutely hinges on the US dollar. What happens with the dollar? So let's see what happens next week. So that's that. Let's do the oil. Oil has been a bit. I mean, it's been volatile. There was a big move. I had an options trade on oil, and there was a big move on options expiry in May. on Wednesday. Big squeeze in the afternoon. I don't know. What do you think? It's a bit scrappy for me. Oil. I'd arguably rather be a buyer than a seller on the short-term chart. You could make the argument that over the last week at least, we have seen clearly the price having a go at recovering. It'd be interesting if next week it got maybe knocked back to $71.50, $71. Perhaps we'll see some buyers come back in there. On the dailies, it's all a bit nothing, isn't it? For me, oil. It's probably the most boring market we've looked at today because so much stuff has been interesting. Bit boring, perhaps, but there you go. That's what it is. That's where we are. On oil, natural gas. Are we ready for liftoff in the natural gas price? It has been interesting. I mean, clearly, I did a natural gas video this week, and I left an order in to buy, and I missed. It's not been filled because the price has moved higher. But if we looked at the big picture on natural gas from those $10 highs in August of last year, that trend is still down. It needs to break $3 to even show signs of shaking off the big downtrend. But it's had a great run. It's interesting. We saw these lows set in April, multi-year lows in natural gas down at 189. The price came down to it beginning of May, down to 192. And we've seen it bounce. It's bounced really strongly. For those of you who are fans of patterns, a bit of a double bottom going on there. So if that is a double bottom, what's the target? The target is 34, 45, 79 up here. That's the target from the double bottom. I'm not a fan of patterns, but there you go. That would be the target. But on the hourlies, sort of sideways, and then had a right old move 3 o'clock yesterday, and it's moved a little bit higher today. It is a crazy market, natural gas. I think it still has the mantle for the crazy market of the moment, natural gas, but that recovery off those lows is still going. It'll still be a buyer of the dip. I think the video I did on Wednesday of this week, I was a buyer of a dip if it got to 215 or whatever it was, and it hasn't happened yet, but let's see. But a bit of relief perhaps for anybody who's been, and I know there's quite a few, who's been buying natural gas on the way down. But, let's not forget that big trend is still down. But I think it is encouraging the price action over the last 5 weeks or so that this low has held. We haven't seen, a major low in gas hold since December, a previous low hold. And ultimately that got broken. But we're seeing similar stuff happen now. Let's see what happens. So I'll be a buyer of a dip, short-term dip in natural gas. So that's it. Let's see. And Bitcoin. I was just looking at this just before I started. I think I'd be a buyer of Bitcoin here as well. We saw the move on Friday, last week's live stream, where it broke below the lows. What were the lows? 26.5 from the end of March. It did trade down to 25.8. on Friday, and it's come back and it's held. An aggressive trade, I think, on Bitcoin would be a buyer now, wherever it is, 26.9-ish, and a stop maybe at 25. This may be an aggressive trade. A more patient trade is to wait and see. Do we move back to the trend line thing from end of last year? But for me, that recovery is still going. It's just whether you think it's going to take off from here, or are we going to see it under a bit more pressure and be a buyer of a dip? Let's see. So that's the stuff for this week, the major stuff. I'll dip into the questions in a minute, but really interesting. If you've watched live streams in the past, I'm a big fan of Nasdaq and S&P. I always have normally at least one trade on one of those all the time. I think it's really interesting, this S&P move yesterday and today, moving out. Those trends are still intact. That's interesting. DAX, look at the DAX go. All-time highs for the German stock market. So that's all pretty positive, isn't it? And this dollar index, we had a good run. So loads to watch really in these markets over the next week. So I'm going to jump into the questions in a sec. A quick reminder to sign up for the newsletter, which goes out over the weekend, so it only goes out 1 day a week. I write it normally on a Saturday or Sunday. Go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, put your details in there, and you can sign up for the newsletter. You can find out more about the course I run on there, broken it all down. The performance numbers from last year. Past performance does not, of course, guarantee future performance. You can subscribe. If you want to join the WhatsApp group separately, you can do that from here. There's a page, a subscribe page, so you can subscribe to the WhatsApp group if you want to do that separately. A few people have done that. You can find out the broker I trade with on that page there. So go to the website and buy something is my message there. Right, let's have a look at some of the stuff you want to look at. Let's have a quick look in the comments. So first one in, Tom was in right out of from the start. As you predicted, Swiss yen pulled back and bounced and is now back at the recent high. Do you think it will pull back again? Got no idea. I don't know. So when were we talking about this? Was it last week then? So it would have been here, wouldn't it? So I would have been trying to buy a pullback probably because it broke out, didn't it? Let's just take this. So we broke out. This is the Swiss franc against the Japanese yen. So it's not a market I trade, so I haven't missed out on anything. But broke out, sells off. So I would have been, if it was one I traded, I would have bought it end of last Friday at 151-ish. And here we are at 153.70. So what would I do now? What I would do now, I wouldn't do anything here. I think it's an interesting one for next week. Does it break out through 154? So for me, if it broke through 154, I would be a buyer, and the closest I'd have my stop would be the other side of those May low, 11th of May lows at 149.80. So that would be the absolute closest. I'd probably have it a bit wider, to be honest. So that would be the trade I would do now. Or like you say, if it pulls back next week, I'd look to see if it stops again and be a buyer. But that is bullish. You know, we've had a breakout. I mean, the trend had been up anyway for forever, since 2020. So we're 3 years into this uptrend, Swiss franc, Japanese yen. It is an interesting market, isn't it? I should add it. There because at least it takes the dollar out of the equation, doesn't it? Let's add it onto the list of things to watch. Let's push it up there a bit. Yeah, so for me, if it breaks 154 next week, it looks like a buy, doesn't it? Let's see. But that looks bullish. The old squiggles are maybe a bit bearish. The RSI, a bit of bearish divergence going on. But let's see. Let's see what happens. But that looks good. Markets look very bullish. To Treasury, gold. What are your Hi David, what are your thoughts on how much of a profit does a trade need to achieve before the stop loss is adjusted? I cover that in my trading course, funnily enough. And it's really important because, of course, what is the mistake that most people make? They all take profits too quickly. So I think, as a broad rule of thumb, if there are 100 people on this live stream, I would say most of you are taking profits too quickly. Because there's a really interesting study that I've referred to in the past in the newsletter, where a US broker in 2011, I want to say, looked at something like 4 million trades done by their clients. And typically, it was not quite half, but it was almost, if they made 50 quid on a trade, they were losing about 90 quid when they were wrong. So most people take profits far too quickly. And I go into that in some depth on the trading course. So there you go. When you do that, you'll find out more about that. But, as a free tip, you absolutely have to be looking to maximize your profits. Let's go back to this account, actually. Let's show it. So real world, this is this account that I opened. I put 2 grand in to use it on these live sessions. I'm looking at the open profit at the moment. It's up 625 quid open profit. But look, where's all the profit? Most of the profit in the NASDAQ trade, right? The NASDAQ trade. So I'm up 625. What's the exchange rate at the moment? 120, isn't it? Something like that. So I am up, I can't even do the maths because it's a Friday afternoon. I can't do the maths. $500 divided by 1.24, whatever the exchange rate is, 400 quid. So out of the 625 quid open profit, 400 pounds of that is in one trade. So that does demonstrate. So 64% of my profit is in one of my trades, one trade. So that shows you the importance of running profits when you're right for as long as possible, trying to maximize the profits. Okay, and then you have all these trades down here that aren't really doing very much. So it's a really important question, and it absolutely is one of the key things to being a profitable trader is to run your winners. So there you go. Sterling yen. Let's have a look at sterling yen. So we're seeing a lot of yen weakness, aren't we? That's, for me, that would be, it's been, again, I had a really good run with sterling yen in 2020, this trade, and a bit into 2022. And then it all got a bit, I haven't traded it for a while because it's all been a bit scrappy, hasn't it? But it is interesting. This is another interesting one to watch next week. You know, we're back up to these, let's call it 172.50. Are we going to see a breakout on sterling yen? Let's see. So for me, I suppose there's a couple of ways of looking at this. There's always an argument for being a buyer or a seller, isn't there? If you wanted to go short now, you've got a great place to go short. Go short with a stop above 173 if you think it's going to run out of steam again. Or for me, watch to see, do we get a breakout again next week? So let's see. So a bit of a wait and see one, but an interesting one. Do you use the RSI ever? Not for my own trading, no. I put it on for entertainment purposes. And I put it on because people always want to see, or most people always want to see a bit of the squiggles on there, like the oscillators. But no, I don't even bother looking at RSIs personally, or anything like that. Can we cover Canada, Japanese yen? There's a lot of against the yen stuff coming up today. I am long targeting 105.5. It looks all right, doesn't it? Yeah, so I would say, you know, looking on the dailies, trend is up. Again, perhaps a bit, you know, we've seen a lot of yen weakness, haven't we? Perhaps a bit overextended in the short term. But if it's sold off next week, I'd be happy to be a buyer in that one. If on the dailies, I'd want my stop the other side of, at least the other side of the 11th of May lows at 99.35. I think that looks good, doesn't it? I think. So if I was long, I would be happy, I think, to stay long on that. So good luck with it. Can we have a look at Synopsys, S-N-O-P, Synopsys on the NASDAQ? Wow, what's happened with that today? What do they do? Technology services, package software. So they were 377 and they're 413 at the moment. Big breakout, isn't it? Now for me, I think if you're in it, it's great. For me, I wouldn't chase it, personally, for my own trading. I'd wait and see what happens. Do we get a pullback? All the usual nonsense. I'm guessing we've had earnings out, so the move is on earnings, isn't it? So the expectation was 247. They came in at 254. Why have they jumped so much? They must have said something in their earnings. Anyway, whatever. So I think that's interesting. It looks like it's breaking out, doesn't it? So for me, that would be one for next week, to watch the pullback. If we get the pullback, how far did the pullback go? Completely up to you what you do with it, of course, but for me, I don't like chasing markets. So if it takes off next week, then I'd miss it. But I think it's interesting if you get a bit of a squiggle back. Let's see what happens. I can never pronounce this one. Is it Chipotle, whatever they are? I can never pronounce them. Oh, that's had a nice little move, isn't it, as well? So again, have you got an earnings gap there? Yeah. So earnings, it's interesting. So it's gapped higher on earnings, and it's carried on pushing higher. So that's one, I think, where if I had been waiting for the pullback, I'd have missed the boat a bit. Again, where do you buy the old Chipotles? Where do you put your stop? You know, for me, the consideration is always, where does my stop go? If I was a buyer today at $2,100 for the stock, I would want my stop probably below this low after the earnings, 26th of April lows. So that's what I would probably go with. But tricky one when they move like that, but for me that's a pretty bullish move, isn't it? Is that all-time? That is all-time highs, isn't it, for those? So yeah, so I'd be either jump in and buy it now and with a wide-ish stop to give it room to chop around, or sit on my hands, wait to see if there's a dip and see if you get the option to buy the dip. Let's see what happens. Do you use support and resistance? Yes. Or supply and demand levels. Don't know what supply and demand levels are. So I use, absolutely, you know, support and resistance, price action. I suppose I'm a price action trader rather, and an investor as well. I use it in my investing stuff as well. You know, I'd use pretty much the same approach. for medium term and shorter term. Shorter term is a bit different, but not massively different. But, you know, this idea of supply and demand, or not supply and demand, support and resistance is really important to me. You know, I qualified as a technical analyst back in 1995. So clearly I know all the stuff, all the theory. And I think like a lot of people, when I started trading, you know, like a lot of people, I put some Fibonacci on, which I think is the biggest load of cobblers out there now. But I'd put some Fibonacci's, look at that. And of course I'd have to add, you know, loads of indicators. I don't even know where the indicators are on here. I'd add indicators and all of that. Oh, there we go, they're in there. So I'd have to have some Bollinger Bands on. Do that, there we go, look at that. So I'd end up with crazy charts, like a lot of people, and end up not seeing the wood for the trees. And in my opinion, and ultimately, if you make money trading using Fibonacci, more power to your elbow, because this game is all about making money. It's not about who can have the prettiest looking charts. But I think for most people, they end up looking for a holy grail that isn't there. So I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. And so much of my focus, going back to that question about when to take profits, is on, you know, putting the trade on is easy. Managing the trade is the important thing. You know, going back to the big winner, the NASDAQ trade, or the gold trade has blipped into $4 profit so far. You know, so much of it is about that rather than where you get in. I think we waste so much energy on where we get in, and that doesn't decide where you profit, how much you make or how much you lose. You know, it's where you get out, clearly, is the important thing. So for me, yeah, price action, not squiggles. I'm looking for NTR to possibly go to 53.60. NTR, Nutrien. Could it be a swing from that level? Oversold. Let's have a look. Nutrien, 53.60. Is that one? I mean, I wouldn't buy them personally, but maybe at 53.60 down here somewhere. Yeah. I mean, for me, the big trend is still down. So I'd much rather find something that was trending high. Let me have a quick look how... I said I started stock trading this week. Let me see. Have a quick look on another screen how some of my stock trades are doing. Let's see if there's a big winner of the week so far. Oh no, it looks a bit boring. What's the biggest winner so far? Workday. So I did this in the middle of the week. Workday. I bought those. So for me, I'd much rather buy into something that was trending already like that, rather than going back to NTR and buying something that was falling and trying to pick the bottom. So not one for me, but let's see what happens. What's your view on SQ? SQ. Block, okay. What do they do? IT, so I don't know. I suppose you could be like a speculative buyer, couldn't you? You could take the view, it's stuck in a range, isn't it? Down here. And we're at the bottom of the range, aren't we? 51.50 was the bottom of the range from October last year. So if I was a buyer now, a 58 and a bit, be a buyer with a stop outside of 50. So maybe that's one. But again, I'd much rather find something that was trending. So, yeah. What do you think of soybeans? Soybeans had a big sell-off this week. I am looking to get short soybeans because it broke this old support and it broke the lows from October, soybeans. So I think, you know, and it had been, I did buy it in February, I think, and I got stopped out. I was buying to this recovery and it's been breaking down since then. So it looks a bit bearish to me. I suppose you could though, again, there are always two sides to the coin. You could always take the view, well, it's still held above the lows from July of last year. So you could make that a bullish argument for soybeans, couldn't you? But I'd rather sell a rally at the moment in soybeans than try and buy the dip personally. So, but I'm not in any hurry to do anything. You said zinc. What does zinc look like? I don't know. Zinc futures, they're going to look a bit funny. I mean, that looks really weak, doesn't it, zinc? That'd be a good trade, that, wouldn't it, on the way down? Yeah, absolute downtrend, isn't it? For me, anyway, on zinc. So So I'd be a seller of strength on zinc. So where's that gone from? That's gone from 380 in April, so a year ago, to 226. So 160, lost 40% price of zinc in the last year. Interesting. It's interesting that everyone is so bearish on stocks, and most of the mid-cap stocks are starting to break out. Yeah, I think, and I picked up on it a bit a couple of months ago. I think just in some of the live stream chat, people asking about, would stock markets going to crash, and it's absolutely, when most people think something's going to happen, that's the time to start thinking the other direction. And I do, given what we're seeing in stock markets, let's see. Wheat. I think I'm short wheat at the moment, or is it corn? I can't remember. Corn. I'm short corn at the moment, or is it? No, I'm short wheat. I'm short wheat at the moment. Yeah, I'm short wheat. The trend is down. I've been short for a bit from in here somewhere. It's been a bit boring, but for me, that trend in wheat is still down, and I'm happy to stay short on wheat. Yeah, it's interesting. Some of these foods, given we saw. Accelerated by the situation, the invasion of Ukraine a year ago. Here's wheat last year was trading at 13.36 a bushel or whatever it is. There's more than halved since then. A lot of these things that have fueled inflation, I'm guessing, food stuff has absolutely come off the boil recently. There's soybeans again. I mean, sugar is still going strong, I think. Coffee's doing all right. I mean coffee trade, but again, it's well off its highs from last year. So, and wheat for me, trend is down and I'm short. Shopify. Oh yeah, that's good, isn't it? That's an interesting one, that. So it is breaking out. I'll be a buyer of the dip on that, personally, somewhere. Don't know where. I'd rather have a bigger dip. But let's see. Let's see what happens. But yeah, nice little trend higher in Shopify since October last year. Is that earnings again, isn't it? What do they do on their earnings? Surprise, 124% surprise. So the expectation was for them to lose money, and they scraped a small profit of 1 cent per share. And their revenue was better than expected. Interesting. And that's it, isn't it? If there's no more questions, I think we're done. We're done there. So I think we've got a really interesting week next week. Let's see what happens. Perhaps we'll see stock markets cool off a bit after the great run we've seen over the last few days or so. But interesting moves, I think, in stocks over the last week or so. That's interesting to watch. Dollar, interesting to watch because of the impact it has on so many other things. Pound, euro, gold, all that nonsense. So yeah, natural gas, because it's trading at its best levels since whenever it was. Let's go back. March, so a two-month high in natural gas. So loads to watch. So that's that. We'll do it all again next Friday. Thanks for coming along. As usual, if you're not subscribed, if you can click on subscribe, if you can click the like button, it all helps the old stuff. Go to the website to find out more. Sign up for the trading course. You can sign up for the WhatsApp group separately if you want to. Join the newsletter, which is free. But otherwise, I think we're done there, aren't we? So let's see how these markets end today, and we'll do it all again next Friday. But until then, good luck with your trading, and let's see where we are in a week's time.